Now to Joe Johnson, who resigned as a Conservative minister over the May deal and now wants another referendum. And also here is the Labour MP Stephen Kinnock, who's been arguing for the plan known as Norway Plus. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Joe Johnson, for a Remainer like yourself, why not go for this plan, remaining in the single market, in the customs union, as close as possible to being in the EU, some would say?
Well, I have great respect for Stephen and others who've been promoting the idea of Norway Plus. However, in my view, I do think it's a non-starter. It suffers from many of the same problems that the Prime Minister's deal does, in fact, even more so. And for me, the most important of these problems is that it will leave us a rule taker rather than an equal participant in the making of rules that will govern huge swathes of our economy. And that's a fundamental democratic deficit that I think is going to be, in time, unsustainable and completely unacceptable for us as a democracy.
And Stephen Kinnock, this is what your party leader has been writing in The Guardian today. It says this idea would leave Britain as an across-the-board rule taker of EU rules without a say. Jeremy Corbyn's view.
Well, our party is calling for a strong customs union and strong single market deal. In my opinion, that is Norway Plus. We've set out what we want to achieve. What we are arguing for is the roadmap to get there. You can't have a what without a how, and we need a clear plan to put in place. On the rule taker, rule maker issue, we would move from the European Court of Justice to the EFTA Court, which frequently diverges from ECJ rulings. We also have
EFTA, we should explain,
the European Free Trade Association Court. It's a different court to the European Court of Justice. We have the EEA Joint Committee. We have the EFTA Surveillance Authority. So there's a well-established set of institutions, a treaty that has existed since 1993. The challenge we have with Theresa May's deal and the second referendum proposal, and I have huge respect for Joe and what he's arguing for, but the problem is that both are very, very risky. The Prime Minister's deal is full of fudge and waffle. It's a leap of faith. We don't really know what we're getting. And there are also tremendous risks associated with the second referendum proposal. So I think what Norway Plus does...
You mean from your perspective that Leave might win?
Risks are also massive division in the country and also the impact on parliamentary sovereignty. I think it's our job as MPs to step up now and solve this problem.
Well, just to build on the point I was making, I think Norway Plus clearly doesn't deliver on Brexit. If the referendum result was meant to have been all about immigration and taking back control, it really does neither of those. As
because the single market means that we would continue to accept freedom of movement.
We'd still be bound by all of the obligations to accept freedom of movement, and we would become an even bigger rule taker than we would under the Prime Minister's deal. And I think basically it would see us become a nation of lobbyists camped outside the European Parliament in Brussels. How undignified an outcome for Brexit would that be?
Particularly on this point, Stephen Kinnock, about freedom of movement, you'll know that many people, including Labour voters, voted to leave, particularly on the issue of immigration.
On the point of the mandate, for me, a 52-48 mandate is a mandate to move house but stay in the same neighbourhood. I've always felt that there is a mandate for a soft Brexit. That's what 52-48 means. I've also always felt there is a majority in the House of Commons for a soft Brexit. On free movement of labour, as your report rightly pointed out, Articles 112 and 113 of the EEA agreement provide a treaty-based basis for an emergency break and a renegotiation. I absolutely accept that we would think very, very carefully before using that measure because of the risk of retaliatory measures. But, it's there in the treaty. It's a solid platform for negotiation.
Now, Joe Johnson, many Conservative Remainers who like the idea of this proposal will say it's not ideal, but it has advantages. We'd be outside the Common Agricultural Policy, the Fisheries Policy, and also, as Stephen Kinnock was saying, the European Court of Justice.
Well, I don't accept that you should accept a worst of all worlds outcome, and this is another of those. And just on Stephen's point, if I may, on freedom of movement and Article 112 of that treaty, which is described as an emergency break, it's very clear that that couldn't be used as a sort of a systematic means of doing immigration management by the UK, and we wouldn't be able to enter this in bad faith, expecting to be able systematically to use the emergency break to control freedom of movement. That would simply not be accepted.
Stephen Kinnock, how realistic politically do you think this idea is? I mean, I assume that you've been talking to people across the benches. Some of the Conservatives are in favour of it. One hears that there's even cabinet support.
Well, just quickly on free movement, of course, a second referendum which led to us remaining in the EU certainly would not solve the free movement of labour problem either. In terms of political support, it's been great actually to work across party divides. I think the country is crying out for us to put our narrow tribalism to one side.
But do you think there's cabinet support?
Solution in the national interest? We understand that there are at least 10 cabinet ministers who are supporting this arrangement. What we need the Prime Minister to do when she loses the vote on Tuesday is to go onto the steps of Downing Street and make a very clear statement that we must pivot now to Norway Plus. And I think she can also say to the Labour Party, if you don't get your motion of no confidence and the general election, which I certainly hope that we will, but if we don't get that, then we need to put this to a vote because it also delivers on Labour's request for a customs union and a strong single market deal.
Jo Johnson, Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary on the programme earlier, arguing for Theresa May's deal, made the point that there's no majority for another option. Doesn't the disagreement that we're hearing between you two now prove him right?
Well, I think what we're all discovering and what we have discovered over recent weeks is how hard it's going to be for the government or any government to deliver on the promises made during the referendum campaign of 2016. There is a massive gulf between what the Prime Minister is now offering and what Stephen here is offering with respect to the so-called Norway Plus option and all of the promises that were made in the referendum of 2016. Given that gulf, I think it would be very odd for the government to press on with its deal or to switch tack to Norway Plus because it's not Brexit. It doesn't deliver on any of the promises that were made in that campaign. And I think people would feel deceived.
Stephen Kinnock, what about the idea that is now being floated around, which is simply to delay the vote?
I think that would be pathetic. I mean, we've had so much hype around this whole thing. The country is watching with bated breath. It would just be ridiculous not to go ahead with the vote on Tuesday. We have to do that, get to a new decision and move forward. In terms of the promises in the referendum, let's not forget, of course, I would never take my orders from Nigel Farage, but 2 months before the referendum, Nigel Farage went on Question Time and said, look at Norway and Switzerland. They're rich, self-governing, happy countries. Would that really be so bad? So who knows what was promised in the referendum campaign?
Jo Johnson, your thoughts on delaying the vote?
Well, I think it would be an extraordinary admission of defeat by the government. After all, we've had 2.5 years of negotiations. This is meant to be the culmination of 5 days of debate that were opened by the Prime Minister. This was meant to be it, putting the deal to the test of Parliament, and the government would have flunked it.
Can Theresa May herself survive a defeat?
I don't think it's about leadership for me. I think the issue is we've got to do what's in the national interest. And from my point of view, I think what we've learnt is that the promises made have not been delivered by her deal. It's time to go back to the people and ask them if they want to proceed with Brexit on this basis.
Jo Johnson, Stephen Kinnock, thank you both.
Thank you.